yeah, put this one there, should be alright.
Sorry for the slight delay, but we'll resume, Mr. Fraser. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Good afternoon again, sir. Mr. Oaten, I'm not giving you this as homework, or actually just trying to be helpful, but the point I put to you earlier this afternoon about the depth of study being based on 23 studies with respect to incineration. And Mr. Watson tells me that if you want to check it, you will see it at page 140 of the main report, and I think it's also in table 3.9. Just so if you're wanting to check on it, you don't have to spend the whole day.
Just to be clear, I don't have the main report.
You don't, sir. But I'm just trying to be helpful.
I will have a look at it. Potentially return.
No, you only have the summary on it, so that's fine. Yes, so if we can go back to my questions, please. Your proposal relies upon achieving emissions limits or standards for nitrogen. Actually, just remind me, is it nitrogen dioxide or nitrogen oxide?
Nitrogen oxide.
It's nitrogen oxide, isn't it? For nitrogen oxides of 125 micrograms per cubic meter.
Milligrams, yeah.
Sorry, milligrams. Sorry, quite right. I can't even read my own writing. Per cubic meter, isn't it?
That's right, yeah.
And again, there is no example of a plant operating to that standard, is there?
With SNCR, no.
Well, I noticed you put in the qualification of with SNCR. Of course, it is possible, isn't it, to achieve lower emission levels with SCR, selective catalytic.
It is, yes.
Which could have been provided for this plant, couldn't it?
It could.
Which, of course, would have helped with public perception.
My suspicion is that if I now said we're going to halve nitrogen dioxide emissions, that probably wouldn't change the opposition to the plant. So no, I don't agree with that.
Okay. And as I understand it, the main evidence put forward to the inquiry to support that figure of 125 milligrams is in, I think it's called document 23, isn't it?
It is,
the supplementary or the clarificatory information for the
yes, that's true.
Which I've mislaid, but I'll have it with me in a moment, I think. It's actually entitled further clarification. And as I understand it, the information from the manufacturers we see in Appendix A. Is that right?
Well, we see information from the manufacturer in section 2 and some letters of support in.
Right. Well, that's what I just wanted to. The direct documents from the manufacturers, I think, are in Appendix A.
Yes.
In section 2, I think you summarised all the
summarised technical information provided by.
Yeah, but we don't actually see it provided anywhere. Is that right?
Yes, that's true.
I think again, no boiler manufacturer has been able to identify any plant operating at that level of emissions as such, have they?
Indeed.
Sure. And indeed, no boiler manufacturer has warranted to you that they would be able to provide such plants.
No, it wouldn't be appropriate at this stage, no.
Sure. And then if we turn to see the letters of support in Appendix A, we've got the letter from Andritz first. And indeed, they make the point in the third paragraph of the letter that there is no operational data to show operational at that level of emissions. That's correct, isn't it?
That's right, yes.
And what they say is, I think that they trust that 125 milligrams is achievable in principle.
Yes.
So the way they put it, I think, is they trust it's achievable in principle.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's very far from saying that they're confident or satisfied that it can be done, isn't it?
Yes, they said we trust. This is in the context of, as myself and my colleagues discussing with them and saying, we achieve 125 or there is no plant. So it's worth discussing that. But anyway, yes, I agree. They say we trust. They don't say we guarantee that a plant that we will give you will achieve this, because we haven't asked them to give a specification of that.
And indeed, the evidence, the letter there, I think, is also based upon a particular specification for the fuel, isn't it?
Levels of nitrogen, yes.
No, for the fuel. It's based, isn't it, on waste wood with an average nitrogen content of 1.8% DS as a single fuel.
Yes, so nitrogen content of the fuel, yes.
Well, sorry. It seems. Can I just make sure I understand what's being said there? It refers to waste wood as a single fuel. Now, what does it mean by that?
It means not co-fired with other fuel.
And what's the proposal here?
Burn it with primarily waste wood with a small amount of refuse-derived fuel.
Yeah. So the proposal here is not for fuel as specified in that letter, is it?
Not quite, no. Sure.
So the letter, which is dependent upon a very precise fuel input, is not actually the fuel input that's proposed before the fire.
It's slightly different flavour.
Is that not another uncertainty that might perhaps add to public concern?
I don't agree with that, actually, no. Yes, the fact that legislation does, I remain confident that this level can be achieved.
Right. And then the other letter of support is from Babcock and Wilcox.
Is it?
And we can see that they tell us again in the second paragraph that the outcome depends on the quality of the fuel. I think they're putting it in the context of how they go about doing their calculations, really. But what they're telling us is what your outcome is will be influenced in part by what your fuel is.
Well, no, actually, what they're actually saying there is that depending on the quality of the fuel, we design for wet oxygen content. So it is very specifically related to the oxygen level, which then links through to the other enclosures.
Yes, links through. So again, what you get at the end, what the end of your calculation is, will depend upon what has happened and what is the input, won't it?
No, what I mean by that is they say that statement they normally design for wet oxygen content between 3.5% and 4%,
Yeah.
which links to a dry oxygen level. Then they move to enclosure 3, which is my figure 2 in section 2.4.
Just hang on a second. So that's your figure 2.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which shows levels of NOx at different levels of oxygen. So that is allowed to say, right, this is what the oxygen level we expect to see, which links to this level of nitrogen dioxide. That is, and that's what it's leading up to.
Sorry, you finished. Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
No,
okay,
I wasn't sure whether that was a finish or just a thought.
I'll stop there.
Pardon?
I'll stop there. Yeah.
No. Please, I didn't want to interrupt you, but I didn't want to be told that I should be asking you another question.
No. So they identify the levels of nitrogen dioxide which link to that level of oxygen, and then calculate from there.
Yes, but I'm still not quite sure. Yes, I'm still not quite sure that we're in disagreement, Mr. Overton.
No, I don't think we are.
I think the point. I think to be fair, the point you're making is they're being much more specific about the particular point they're addressing with relation to what is the effect of the fuel.
Yes.
But I think the point that they're making applies generally as well, because obviously it's one of the inputs that goes into your calculations as to what you're going to get out. It's a potential variable, I suppose, because the quality of the fuel can vary, and if the fuel varies, you will get a different end calculation.
Yes, indeed. So we've presented them our problem, the type of fuel. You'll note they refer to RDF waste, as it happens. They've said, depending on the quality of the fuel, this is what our normal level would be, and here is therefore we work through data to demonstrate the impact. So they're fairly precise about how they try to address our question.
I understand that point, but I think just going back to the general point I was making, that obviously if the quality of the fuel were somewhat different, they would get a different result. Whether it's a materially different result would then be a matter for assessment, obviously, but it would be a somewhat different result.
Potentially, yes.
Thank you. What we can see, they give technical explanations as to how they got to their position, but what they then tell us at the end of the letter is, for other reasons, we feel confident a NOx emission of less than 125 milligrams per cubic metre at, I think that's 10 milligrams per cubic metre of ammonia is split is not a problem.
Yes.
Sure. And indeed, what I think you're saying, I think you say you get some support in it from this letter, is that really this is just a combination of two standard technologies, effectively, to get the end result.
Yes.
But not, I think to be fair again, not a, I think you say it's new evidence, not a combination that has been plainly used to date operationally.
That is. Yes, I think that is true. Yes.
But you see, I mean, I have to say, it's interesting, isn't it? Because if the position is that it's really not difficult to get this emission level of 125 milligrams per cubic metre, well, that begs the question as to why people aren't being asked to do it in the first place as the best available technology.
Referring here to specifically the waste wood fuel. Yes. And should they be injecting ammonia or not injecting it at all? So that is the balance which is being considered. Should we introduce ammonia as an additional reagent, or should we not? And if the impact of the plant at an emission limit of 200, which actually means it will run at probably more like 180, because it tends to will run below the emission limit. If the impact at that level is negligible or not a problem, then the view of the Environment Agency is why introduce an additional reagent to achieve an impact which is less negligible. Sorry, no, more negligible. It's even more negligible than negligible.
Well, because we would be seeking, wouldn't we, to reduce emissions of pollutants such as nitrogen dioxide to as low as we can feasibly achieve.
Yeah, which is what the best available technology is about. I agree.
Then is this approach, which you're telling us is a combination of two fairly standard methodologies, best available technology?
I suspect for waste wood plants of this type, it is getting that.
So why isn't it, for example, being required elsewhere?
Such as?
Are you aware of it being required elsewhere?
I am not aware of this level of nitrogen dioxide being achieved elsewhere.
Is it being required?
SNCR is being applied on wood plants elsewhere, not I believe. It's being applied on municipal waste plants all over the place. The Western wood plant, which isn't mentioned in this document but is referred to elsewhere, is achieving levels of 160 to 180 milligrams per normal metre cubed, and therefore is not using ammonia injection, although that isn't easy for that to be retrofitted. Again, because the impact it is having is sufficiently low.
But I mean, what as I understand it, is being said or you're inviting us to conclude, is that really we can have every confidence that an emission level of 125 will be met.
Yes.
Whilst it's not being done operationally, the technology isn't really very difficult. It's just a combination of technology that's already out there.
Yes.
And so I come back to the point: why isn't our level of 125 being set elsewhere? For example, at Ince.
And I'll repeat the point that the assessment of best available technology now happened. To be fair, Ince actually hasn't applied for permit yet, so this version hasn't happened.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because Ince, of course, as you pointed out, is next to SAC, isn't it?
It is an interesting point, you're quite right. So what has happened at Ince is the planning application has been based on an emission limit which is the highest which would possibly be permitted, which is 200. It is entirely possible that when the permit application is submitted, it will be considered, as you say, later to this month potentially, that nitrogen dioxide level should be lower. I'm aware of some municipal waste plants which have now got emission limits below 200 on the grounds that it is achievable.
And the point you made just before, which I think again is a point made by the Environment Agency, we can pick it out if necessary, it's in the decision document again, that in practical terms, if you set an emission limit of 125, for most of the time you're going to have to operate at something less than 125, because otherwise you end up breaching it.
Yes.
You'd agree with that point?
Yes.
So again, in actual fact, if an emission limit is being set at 125, it's not good enough to show you can achieve 125. In reality, you're going to have technology that allows you to achieve less than, normally less than 125.
Yes.
And again, I'm not sure actually that the letters of support say that. They just look at 125.
They said that they will achieve 125, by which, again, if we move into the realities of how plants are purchased and commissioned, means they will have to demonstrate that they can achieve 125 in a robust test. So therefore, if any boiler supplier says I can achieve 125, what it means is I can achieve 125 with margin.
Well, that's what you're telling us we should read that as saying.
It is, I know what to say. I'm telling you that's what I've said.
Right. You're telling us that's how we should interpret it. I don't think you're suggesting that is what it said. Actually.
No, I mean, the Babcock and Wilcox letter, again, is the most detailed on this.
Yeah.
So they say they expect to generate approximately 213 to 233 milligrams per millimetre cubed of NOx without abatement. A conservative reduction of 50% brings us down to 106 to 116. They then talk about how they expect to achieve 70% with ammonia slip of 15, probably 60% with ammonia slip of 10. So again, they said conservative 50%, we're well below 125, we expect to do better than that. So that's giving, again, support that they've looked at it and they say 125 is fine.
Just stand with me a moment. Right. So, we have a combination of technology that we haven't seen elsewhere before.
Yes.
Which is yet another degree of uncertainty for the public when they're looking at whether or not they're concerned about it.
I suppose we could take it that way, yeah.
Now, the assessment also didn't take into account any contribution from the traffic accessing the site.
No, we didn't.
You, I think, agree that they would be an addition to the staff emission. You've now calculated it, and you tell us, I think it's about 0.76%.
Yes.
Okay.
So that is assuming that lorries travel 10 kilometres, 0.76.
Sorry?
That's assuming the lorries, I think, travel 10 kilometres each. So it's along the length of that 10 kilometres, the total is 0.76.
And 30 kVA.
Yeah.
Can you just tell me
because we experimented with a number of different, using emission factors, experimented with a number of different speeds, and that gave the highest number.
But that's, sorry, you say it gave the highest number, that's at a steady speed, isn't it?
It is, yes.
You actually get more if you model in stops and starts and accelerations.
But equally, I think the lorries would be somewhat disappointed if they travel at an average speed of 30 kilometres per hour on the M60 during non-rush.
My journey this, I won't tell you everything about my journey this morning.
Rush hour thing,
Sorry? Yeah.
But if you use the high figure, that doesn't improve.
if you do a higher figure, you get less. I'll have to check, but that's why we used it. I don't know where I said that point, sorry.
I mean, if you use the high figure, maybe appropriate anyway, but if you use the high figure, it wouldn't improve.
That's the point, yes.
Yes, if you use the higher figure for speed, it would increase the emissions. But if you took into account stopping and starting, which I think there certainly would be, for example, just using the access the vehicles are not going to have a continuous journey over their 10 kilometres, even in non-rush hour conditions.
No, so at the access at this end, where so in the area underneath the bridge and in the roads where there are no people, and on the roundabout where there are no receptors, there would be stopping and starting. Yes.
Well, this all adds to the nitrogen dioxide emissions, though, doesn't it?
It does, but not in the points where the stack emissions go. And I think the point is less than what the levels of transport are less than 1% on the traffic boulevard, even more less than 1% along the motorway, and are therefore screened out as not being significant.
Well, you screen them out as not being significant, but they would add to, at the levels, whatever they are, the stack emissions as we have seen.
Indeed.
So it does mean that the actual overall impact of the proposal would be somewhat greater than that which had been modelled, wouldn't it?
It means the levels of emissions would be somewhat greater. The impact of those emissions, yes, I suppose they would be greater.
So again, to that extent, this was not a conservative assessment, was it?
No, I disagree with that. The reason I just said. Yes, I took off you added a small fraction of a percent onto the emissions and point about some impact. I don't consider that would have made any difference. I do not agree that it would be at all sensible to add this to the traffic emission model.
And again, you don't think that that's another factor that adds to the public concerns?
No, not really.
Now, if we just turn to Mr. Watson's proof for one moment, please. To page 8. He sets out there, page 8, first of all, paragraph 26, the volume of the quantity of nitrogen oxides that will be released each year. And then at paragraph 28, he draws attention to the emissions inventory for that area. He does have the figures there.
Yep.
Now, you addressed that in your rebuttal, where you basically said, don't see the relevance. But I don't think you questioned the figures as such, do you?
I didn't look at the figures, no, so I didn't question the figures, apart from questioning the relevance of selecting one individual square.
Yeah, no, we'll come to that particular point. Though. You don't accept it on the basis of you say what's the relevance, but I don't think there's an issue as such between us about the figures themselves.
No.
Because your point, when we come back to what's the relevance, is we should really concentrate on the impact rather than just the amount that's being put out.
Yeah, exactly.
But what it does show, though, is, if we look at paragraph 26, that a significant volume of nitrogen dioxide is actually being released.
It shows that, yeah, that a 100 tons is not.
Well, we can just see, can't we, from looking at what else is there. That's quite a significant volume, isn't it, in this context? Yeah. And so again, we have a situation where the public would be aware that a significant volume is being released in an area that's a bit of a hotspot anyway. When we look at the adjoining squares, as Mr. Watson explained.
Yes.
So an area that's a bit of a hotspot, significant additional volumes being released. Again, isn't that something that's going to contribute to public anxiety about the impact?
Potentially, yes.
Right. Now, the Western Bioenergy Plant at Port Talbot, that I think burns virgin wood, does it?
It burns virgin wood and clean waste wood. It burns virgin wood and non-WID waste wood.
And non-WID waste wood. That is associated with lower NOx emissions.
It is.
And even though it's associated with lower NOx emissions, it is not achieving an emissions limit of 125, is it?
No, it's not. It's also not using SNCF.
And indeed, if we just take that as an example for one moment, if we take out again code document 67B, the reasons, please. And return to page 127. Can you just help me on this? If you look at page, it was a point you took us to this morning, actually, page 127, and it's the second paragraph down in the right-hand column.
127.
Yeah, sorry, page 127. And it's the second paragraph down the right-hand column, which is addressing, we can see an issue raised of reference was made to emissions from the plants exceeding 200 milligrams per cubic metre. The data was reported to demonstrate low levels of NOx were achievable, however, it's stated that the 2010 figures show NOx of 216, and in our report we stated the increase is due to more waste wood being burnt from the plant. And then what we can see, this I think then is the Environment Agency's response to this. The reported figure for compliance purposes is calculated by subtraction of the measurement uncertainty permit condition 3.5.5. The reported figure would then be 172, which is 80% of 216, which is compliant with the WID limit, notwithstanding this, the NOx concentrations achieved without any secondary measures. So, sorry, I just want to understand what the Environment Agency are telling us there. They're telling us, are they, that they think there's a degree of measurement uncertainty, and so when you look at compliance, you actually do a calculation which gives you a figure lower than the actual measured figure.
They are saying that, yes.
And is that going to apply here?
It will apply here, yes.
Yeah. And is it going to be the same figure of 80%?
Yes, it probably will be.
So, if they set a limit of 125, and in actual fact they measure more than 125, it still could be meeting the limit.
Yes.
I haven't quite understand actually. Well, I always struggle with percentages. If I've done it right, I'm sure you'll be able to correct me. If I've done it right, that would suggest that a measurement of up to 156 would come within the emission limit.
It would, yes.
That might have public concern. That when they're told it's 125, actually there could be measurements of over 150 and it would still be okay.
Fine. It might have public concerns. None of the information I've presented on this point, however, does that.
Sorry, none of the
information I presented to demonstrate 125 can be achieved.
Oh, does this sort of thing?
These are almost actual numbers.
Yeah. Well, just help me on that though. I mean, bearing in mind that of course we accept that the pollution control regime will be implemented effectively and efficiently. Well, what's the reason behind setting an emission level and actually looking at measurements higher than that, saying that's okay?
Sure, it is what the Waste Incineration Directive says. It's a simple answer.
Sorry?
The Waste Incineration Directive contains that provision.
Yes. Okay. And there's been no modelling, I think, of what the situation might be if we were getting measured readings of about 150, 156, something like that, wasn't it? No. Sorry, just going back to the Western biomass plant, bioenergy plant. Sorry, Western bioenergy plant. You said that there was some waste wood being non-with waste wood being.
Yes, I think
do you know what percentage?
I don't know.
It will certainly be less than 70% waste wood, though, wouldn't it?
I wouldn't like to comment.
You don't know.
But no, waste wood is cheaper than virgin wood, so I wouldn't like to comment on what the number is.
You don't know at all, is that what you're saying?
The answer is, I think I do have some information somewhere, I don't know here.
Right. If you dig it out, I'm sure you'll let us have it. Okay. I think what has been happening, though, if one looks at the public register with respect to that particular plant, is that the level of emissions has been increasing as waste wood's been introduced to it.
Yes, this is covered, so I'm trying to find my list before.
Sorry, don't worry. I know the feeling.
Because it is covered in one of the four documents. The response to Davyhulme watch covered it.
Right. Sorry, I probably mislaid mine as well. A second, I'll see the plan, please. Is that the letter to Traffic Council responding to biofuel objection? I think that might be called document 24 to my list slide. Oh, right, sorry. Sure, I can help you with that.
No, it isn't specifically response to any required response to environment agencies or not fully. That were not before the. So the response.
Right, so it's not before the inquiry.
Not before the inquiry.
Okay.
Biofuel Watch put a submission in, and we submitted a response to the environment agency after the planning committee.
Right. With respect to this point about the increase in emissions from the Western bioenergy.
Yeah, exactly. The information I don't think is before the inquiry would be helpful. It obviously could be.
Well, it said I'm certainly not saying you don't have you shouldn't produce it, Mr. Oakland. I have to leave it in your hands whether you want to produce it or not.
Yeah. The only comment I was going to make is that I'll have to confirm the numbers. The point is covered in paragraph 2.48 of my rebuttal.
2.48, good. Just bear with me a second whilst I locate that again.
agree that actually concentrations had increased since the plant started. It hadn't increased to anything which was significantly high. And since here we are concerned about long-term impacts of nitrogen dioxide annual, the highest month was 162, the annual number was rather lower, and the Schedule 5 response, which we don't have, quantifies that rather more precisely. So if it's a point which would be helpful, I would have to provide that data to the inquiry.
Well, I'm certainly not persuading you, but the inspector says he's got enough data as well. I don't want to upset him. Can you spare with me?
Well, I'm happy to have it. It's just a note dealing with that specific.
It's just a document which already in the public domain, not before the inquiry.
Yeah. If we... Yeah, if we just go back to page 127 of CD 67B, Mr. Which
Yes.
was the page we were looking at. Yeah, I don't. If you look at the agency dealing with this point, they, I think, also accept it's the higher figure. They don't suggest that it needs to be corrected as you're suggesting here.
Well, but the BCAG point here, so the point says that the 2009 data which reported to demonstrate low levels are not achievable. However, it states that the 2010 figure showed NOx levels of 260 milligrams per cubic meter. That's what the question states. What I stated in 2.48 was actually at 6% oxygen, which is the important point here. Actually, the highest monthly was 243, so higher than the 216. I agree that the Environment Agency's short response to that takes a different approach in responding, which I can't explain. But I'm happy to provide a more detailed response, which I think would be easy to do, so I will do that.
Well, it may be appropriate that you do that. Right. Now, I think you accept that applying the model in accordance with the guidance provided with the model, that strictly you should have used a higher minimum, I hope I get this right, mode of UCOF, length, which is dealing with the point about the heat island, which I think is a phrase I can understand. I think
have accepted that.
I think that's something that's been accepted by you. And the effect of applying the different moding of UCOF length is it affects the boundary layer height, as Mr. Watson explained briefly in his proof of evidence. I think that's fine.
The effect of the moded of UCOF length in terms of modelling the heat island, yes, is that the turbulent boundary layer remains turbulent all the time. And a good mark, yes.
Yeah, it has implications, doesn't it, for whether the emissions disperse or whether they're grounded earlier.
It does.
Thank you. And again, it would have been relatively easy, wouldn't it, for having accepted that a higher minimum length should have been applied. It would have been relatively easy to run the model with the appropriate length, wouldn't it?
It is, yes.
But that's not something you've chosen at any point to do.
I have done so, yes.
Well, where do we see the result?
I have not submitted the results. The Environment Agency's view was it was inconsequential. The modelling confirmed that, so I didn't see the benefit of submitting the numbers.
Right. So it has been done, but it's not something you've told us about.
No.
And I don't get an opportunity to ask you again later. Is it something you're going to tell us about?
If it would be beneficial, as I say, the Environment Agency's view was it has a small impact. The modelling confirms that.
Well, by small impact, what are we talking about?
About 0.1% of the air quality objective.
0.1% of the air quality objective.
Yeah.
So let me just reconfirm that's going to be That was
That
good.
0.04 was
It's going to be
the
point,
definition.
0.04. Yeah. Okay. Is that using the environment agency factors or using the chemistry model?
Using the environment agency factors.
In 2000, using the 2000 data?
It was, well, it's all the years, so I think it was 2000, I think it was the highest number, yes.
And what was that?
Pardon?
And the highest number was?
The highest number, so the highest impact of the sensitive receptor,
Yeah.
using the environment agency's factors,
Yeah.
was at Tyndall Street 0.69, and then it goes up to 0.74, so 0.5 goes up.
So Tyndall Street goes up from 0.69 to 0.74.
That's right. Other points go up less.
Okay. So what it does demonstrate, having done the model, is that there would be higher nitrogen dioxide concentrations in the affected areas.
Slightly, yes.
What I think the Environment Agency's position was, as you pointed out to us, is that they just concluded it would only have a slight effect, and therefore didn't ask you for further.
Correct, yes. Yes, if you recall, they concluded that the impact at a sensitive receptor in the air quality management area was about 1.7% of the air quality objective, which was negligible. And their wording, I think, if we need to, is that it's less than 2%. The number of length change doesn't actually change that completely at all. It's still less than 2%.
Yeah.
Hence, the environment agency's conclusion wouldn't change.
Yeah, but we're just looking at the Environment Agency's position. They took the position that it would not make a significant difference, and therefore didn't ask you to do the work. Although I think we can also observe that it was an error that they hadn't spotted in the modelling themselves anyway.
It was a point that had been mentioned, yes.
Can you just help me on the modelling? What was the length that you then did use for this new model?
That was 30.
30.
I looked at 100. If you use 100, you actually get less of an impact.
So you did it at both 30 and 100?
Yeah. I should mention, since we're dealing with this detail, I consider 30 more likely to be appropriate given where we are, as in on the outskirts of Manchester.
Right.
So 30 is more likely to be appropriate than
More likely to be appropriate, and you're telling us anyway the worst, from your point of view. Worst case from your point of view.
Yes.
That's very helpful. Thank you. So that actually is a further area of uncertainty for the public, which actually could have been clarified because you tell us the information was there.
It could have been clarified at some point before the inquiry. It couldn't be clarified earlier, obviously.
Now, then, of course, as we've already discussed, the ultimate modelling that was relied upon by the appellants in the environmental statement and the subsequent clarificatory information relied upon the chemistry model,
Yes.
which wasn't accepted by the Environment Agency.
Correct.
And if we just turn, let me just make sure I've got the right document myself first before I send everybody on a wild goose chase. If we just turn to it's core document 15B. And if we turn to page 5, it's part that you looked at with Mr. Kingston this morning. And this was responding to a request for the table to be redone, showing baseline level process contribution and sensitive properties in the AQMA to allow a clearer evaluation.
Yes.
Now, this was redone, but I think redone on the basis of using the chemistry model
Yes.
we've discussed.
Yes.
And we can see there were baseline concentrations there used of 62 micrograms per cubic metre.
Yes.
Which you accept to still be a appropriate figure to work.
Don't we did actually now having these other discussions we've had on Liverpool Road. I think I don't agree that actually that's appropriate for all of these points. So, for example, we have Dindal Street. I'm sure it isn't as high as that there.
Right. Well, that's very interesting. I think that's the very first time we've heard you suggest it's not suitable, isn't it? Because
No.
your proof and your rebuttal proof both tell us 62 is the appropriate figure to use.
The proof and rebuttal proof says that 62 is the appropriate figure to use for receptors close to the M60.
Yeah. And are you saying that it isn't anymore?
No, I'm still saying that is appropriate, certainly for Liverpool Road.
Yeah. Well, which of these are you saying it's no longer appropriate for? Which figure should we be looking at?
Right. I'm
You've obviously
reminding
got-
myself where
Well,
exactly they are.
So you're obviously looking at something. I just think
Figure 12.1 from the environmental statement.
12.1 the so just let me dig it out. Yeah.
Which shows the location of those receptors we've been discussing.
Yeah.
It doesn't show Liverpool Road, but we all know where that is.
Well, Liverpool Road is, of course, the A57, which is the red line that's coming in from the very bottom left-hand corner, isn't it? It works its way then across the motorway.
It does. The specific tube, which we've been talking about, is on the other side of the motorway at that roundabout. So the answer to your question as to which of these would I now use, would I now consider is appropriate, is I would only use 62 for Liverpool Road and possibly for Burton Lane, even that looks a bit far away, and not for any of the others.
Right. Okay. I'm just making a note of that, so I've got it for later.
I would note that while I used 62 in this table, I did comment in the paragraph 2 above it. The sulfur tube, hydrogen tube, is the closest tube to the other receptors in the A3A, although it is likely that the concentration of the tube located is higher than at the receptors as the tube is closer to the M60. So I was explicitly using 62 as the worst case for the purpose of this table.
Yes, the sulfate tube there is referring to just so we don't get confused. That's Liverpool Road. Because in other places we can of course get sulfate echoes, don't we?
Yes,
just so that we don't get confused.
It is, right.
Yeah. In that case, it's referring to Liverpool Road. And so let me just understand the position that you're presenting to the inquiry now. I think is that for the first time, contrary to what you were saying in your proof and your rebuttal proof, and indeed in the supplementary information for the ES, you actually think that 62 should only apply to Liverpool Road and Burton Lane.
Yes,
and that's
what I said.
And that's because
Liverpool Road tube is relatively unique. It is very close to ABC Road. It is very close to a roundabout. It is within in addition, it appears to be an area with overhanging trees, which also doesn't improve its level.
Right, well, we'll come to the overhanging trees point in a moment. But I think that the position is, I think you're saying that until it's pointed out to you by Dr. Holman, you weren't even entirely certain whether the Liverpool road tube was. Or are you saying you were certain, but you were mistaken?
Yes, I was certain it was on the lamppost, and I was mistaken.
Right, sorry, all right. So you were certain, but you were mistaken. So your understanding was it was on the lamppost, and you made your assessment as to its suitability as a sort of a comparator on that basis.
Yes, and to answer this question, I used 62 because that was what Traffic Environment Health Officer thought was an appropriate number, and I accepted that and thought, okay, if it's 62 is the worst case, what does that mean for the assessment? And that's what this demonstrates.
Right. Okay. And so the other factor that you're throwing into the pot, so to speak, is that the view of the local man on the ground, i.e. the traffic officer, was he thought 62 was an appropriate figure to be using, and you didn't disagree with him.
I took that number as well. Okay, that's what he would like to assess. We'll assess that. Yes.
But you obviously gave some weight to that. I think you accepted as somebody who had some knowledge on the ground that was an appropriate thing to do.
To an extent.
Now, the points that you make about Liverpool Road being close to the M60, close to the roundabout, and close to a busy road, the A57, were all points that were equally apparent to you when you thought it was on the lamppost, weren't they?
Yes, they were.
I think it's fair to say there is a slight difference in the distances, but of course, one might argue it's heads and tails here, because whilst it's slightly closer to the motorway, it's slightly further away from the A57, which you effectively.
Yes, indeed.
So the additional point that you make is the uncertainty relating to the overhanging trees.
Yes.
And we can see what we can see from the photographs. I think the inspector's indicated he's going to go and have a look anyway.
Yes,
So
yes.
I don't think we need to discuss here just precisely what the position is, because the inspector will see it himself to be able to decide. But in actual fact, we can't assume, can we, that will result in an increase in nitrogen dioxide reading in the future.
You can't assume that, no.
It could in fact have the alternative effect.
That would be unlikely. You have to think, what are the overhanging trees doing?
Growing.
And the reason they are expressed as a concern is that they prevent air escaping. You're right, if we're looking at fresh emissions, then I suppose they would stop it coming to the top.
But we just don't know. Well, you're saying it might stop it from coming on top. Just remind me, the motorway.
Yes, it could potentially do 60, you're quite right.
Yeah.
So it raises concerns about the accuracy of the tube.
Well, you mean it might actually be underestimating the overall
It
position.
seems unlikely, given that it's already reading substantially higher than anyone else in any other tube. But
Well, I don't think it's necessarily. Well, the figures are there for the inspector to see. You can perhaps make submissions on. Just whilst we're on this question of what data to use as your base, so to speak, you're suggesting we should use the Salford Eccleswood data as generally representative for thinking of buildings Tyndall Street.
I am, yes.
I think we do have, I've forgotten where it is now, but I think we do actually have a photograph, don't we, of where that's. I'm told it's in Mr. Watson's rebuttal. Which is probably somewhere underneath all these papers. Just give me a moment whilst I try to tidy myself now. and the Salford Eccles one is the bottom two of the two photographs, isn't it, on figure 1? And I think the situation there is that, as we can see, the N602 is crossed by a footbridge, I think.
Is that the car park by the station in Eccles?
I think it is, sir. Yes, I think that's right. Yes.
Okay.
It's
It's
crossed by a footbridge, isn't it? And the footbridge is more or less, I think, at grade, isn't it, with the surrounding area. Well, I'll put it another way. The motorway is effectively in a cutting at that point, isn't it, relative to the monitoring station.
Imagining driving along the road, sorry.
Well,
Yeah, I think that's...
Yeah. Now, again, you made the point about with Liverpool Road, the motorway being above, and the trees there, that might actually potentially do an element of shielding of the nitrogen dioxide, if I put it in layman's terms. The effect of being in a cutting, again, means, doesn't it, that not necessarily all of the nitrogen dioxide escapes to the wider area to be picked up in the monitoring tubes there, isn't it?
That is potentially true. I have to look at the precise. It looks as though it's a fairly wide method, but I can see the point you're making.
Yes. So in actual fact, when we look at the factors that because you're saying let's look at Tyndall Street. Let's look at Eccles as a proxy for Tyndall Street. You, I think, accepted that one of the factors we'd have to take into account is the different traffic flows upon the N60 compared to the N602 in the relevant locations. And the more traffic, the more nitrogen dioxide, putting it simply, isn't it?
Yes.
And I think, again, Mr. Watson gives us the figures for that, doesn't he, in his rebuttal proof. It's page 10, paragraph 10 of his rebuttal. And we can see the N60 flows between junctions 10 and 11, 140,000, and on the N602, 78,000 pound terms.
Yes.
Not quite, but almost half the figures for the N60.
Yes.
So there's quite a substantial difference in traffic flow, isn't there? Which will clearly have an impact upon the nitrogen dioxide levels.
Yes.
In addition to that, we've got to factor in, if I call it the Kenyon effect, it might sound like I'm exaggerating, but you know the point, the cutting effect point that we've just discussed. And then there's the issue, of course, too, of downwind and upwind, isn't there, Mr.
Yes.
Oakham? And the position, if we go back to the photograph here, for Salford Eccles,